Hello, welcome back to Wednesday Night Bible Class, you guys. My name is Dr. Jones if you're new here. And also if you're new here, we are walking through a series that we call In Between the Testaments, where we explore what happened from the Old Testament to the New Testament. Tonight we are in chapter 2 of part 5 of our series. And in this chapter, we're looking at the Jews under the Persian rule. If you wouldn't mind, please take a moment and subscribe to our channel. Hit the like button and comment. At the end, we ask questions about the lesson, what you think about this, what you thought about that. If you wouldn't mind, please leaving those in the comments below. That would really help our channel. And also, please share this video in your Facebook Bible groups. We are looking to grow more this year as a class, so we would really appreciate your help. All right, let's go ahead and get into chapter 2 of part 5. This lesson, you guys, contains a lot of names, a lot of ancient names. I am probably not going to say all of these names correctly. If I don't, please correct me in the comments. Otherwise, please forgive me. I am going to do the best that I can with these names. The Jews under Persian rule, which occurred around 420 to 329 BC. Artaxerxes I had a successful reign, having made peace with the Greeks, maintained his power over Egypt, and put down several rebellions. He was a noted cultural leader and successfully completed several projects inside the empire that benefited infrastructure and other needs. He died in about 424 BC, and his son, Xerxes II, took over. Just 45 days into his reign, he was assassinated by his brother, Sogdianus. Another brother, Ochus, secured power in about February of 423 BC, taking the name of Darius II. Upon assuming power, Darius II was confronted with more internal conflict, as well as multiple external threats. He dealt with rebellion in Egypt, the Medes, and the Cadusians between about 410 to 404 BC. Darius II was successful in repelling these, but there were signs that Persian dominance was beginning to wane. Now let's look at Judah after Nehemiah. The information we have regarding Israel between Nehemiah and the end of the Persian period is scarce. This has led to it being characterized as blank or dark age in the history of the Jews. The Jewish state became used to living under foreign domination under the Persians. The Jews paid tribute, but they were also allowed religious freedom. According to Artaxerxes' decree for Ezra, only the priests, and in general those affiliated with the temple, were exempt from paying these taxes. Now, Nehemiah's exact date of death is unknown, but many place it sometime in the 420s. The governor who replaced him was Bagohi. Some have tied him to the civic leader and supporter of Nehemiah mentioned in Nehemiah chapter 9 and chapter 10. Bagohi reversed some of Nehemiah's policies, as he maintained a much more favorable status with the Samaritan leadership, Sanballat's two sons, Eliah and Shelemiah. Serving as high priest at the time of Bagohi was Jonathan, the son of Joiada. His older brother Jeshua had been expelled from Jerusalem by Nehemiah years before for marrying the daughter of Sanballat. Now that Nehemiah was out of the picture, Jeshua returned to Jerusalem to try to steal the high priesthood from his brother, as he believed it was rightly his, being the older brother. Jeshua and Bagohi were close friends, and Bagohi put his weight and influence behind him. Now, this posed a serious threat to Jonathan, who was installed by Nehemiah decades earlier. Questions about his legitimacy would have fueled a crisis. When Jeshua arrived on the temple grounds, Jonathan took him out. Of this, Josephus writes, in confidence of whose support Jeshua quarreled with Jonathan in the temple, and so provoked his brother, that in anger his brother slew him. Now it was a horrible thing for Jonathan, when he was high priest, to perpetrate so great a crime, and so much the more horrible that there never was so cruel and impious a thing done, neither by the Greeks nor the barbarians. However, God did not neglect its punishment, but the people were, on that very account, enslaved, and the temple was polluted by the Persians. Now, when Bagohi, the general of Artaxerxes' army, knew that John, the high priest of the Jews, had slain his own brother, Jesus, in the temple, he came upon the Jews immediately and began in anger to say to them, "Have you had the impudence to perpetrate a murder in your temple?" And as he was aiming to go into the temple, they forbade him to do so. But he said to them, "Am I not purer than he that was slain in the temple?" And when he had said these words, he went into the temple. Accordingly, Bagohi made use of this pretense and punished the Jews 7 years for the murder of Jeshua. When I said Jesus a moment ago, we're not talking Jesus of the New Testament. We're not talking Jesus, the Messiah, the Christ. We're talking a version of the name Jeshua or Yeshua, all the same name. Different people. Let me swing by real quick here and talk about the Jews that were at Elephantine. We covered this a little bit in our Walk Through the Old Testament series. You can find those videos on our channel, but I just want to go over a couple of things here. In about 722 BC, the Assyrians had captured the northern kingdom of Israel. Now, some of the refugees moved to the south, where they would become mercenaries for the king of Judah. After the Babylonian invasion, they would eventually end up in Egypt, where they were collectively known as the Arameans. The Sumerians settled on a Nile River island known as Elephantine. In the early 520s BC, they built a temple to Yahweh at Elephantine for worship. There, they made animal, bread, and incense offerings. They observed the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. They also recognized other deities. In 410 BC, the temple at Elephantine was attacked by the rulers of an Egyptian temple devoted to the god Khnum, which was literally located across the street from the Jewish temple. The Egyptian deity was fashioned into the image of a goat, and the priests had serious difficulties with the Jews using goats for sacrifices. The attack inflicted serious damage on the temple, so much so that worship was unable to continue there. Leader of the Elephantine Jews, Jedaniah, petitioned Yohanan in Jerusalem for assistance in rebuilding their temple. Yohanan did not reply. It's thought that by ignoring the request that he was trying to send a message about the superiority of the temple in Jerusalem. After about 3 years, Jedaniah wrote to the governor of Judea, Bagohi, as well as Sanballat's 2 sons, Delaiah and Shemaliah, which were co-governors over Samaria. They immediately petitioned the satrap of Egypt to assist in rebuilding the temple at Elephantine. By about 402 BC, it appears it was functional again. However, by 400 BC, Persian power was overthrown in Egypt and the temple was destroyed again. The latest document from those at Elephantine dates to about 399 BC and notes how Egypt was in the middle of an immense power struggle. What happened to the Jews at Elephantine is unknown, as we never hear from them again. The Mesopotamian Judeans were well assimilated into their surrounding society. Evidence from 6th century BC cuneiform documents reveals that this started with the Judeans relocated by the Babylonians. This integration extended beyond Zerubbabel's return to Jerusalem. The 5th century BC Marashu family archives, belonging to a Babylonian family from Nippur, further highlights this. The family, involved in real estate in Babylonia, had numerous Judean clients with Hebrew names. These Judeans owned property, worked as tenant farmers, and were employed in various sectors, including royal estates. For instance, a Judean named Hanai ben Mehanim managed birds for Darius II's kitchens. Very interesting stuff. The names of Judeans in 5th century BC Mesopotamia offer insights into their diaspora life. Their Hebrew names indicate a continued connection to Yahwism. However, some names in the Marashu archives were Babylonian or Persian, often including foreign deities' names. Without their relatives' Hebrew names, identifying them as Judeans would be challenging. These diverse names reflect a common cross-cultural naming practice. This is exemplified in the Book of Esther. Mordecai's name derives from Marduk, and Esther's name Hadassah has Hebrew origins, while Esther could be linked to an old Indian term, the goddess Ishtar, or the Greek Aster. Such names indicate significant cultural assimilation. The possibility of the blending of Jewish and Persian cultures and religious practices, like that at Elephantine and in Judah and Samaria, cannot be ruled out among the Mesopotamian Judeans. Names like Haggai and Shabbatai, linked to Hebrew words for festival and Sabbath, suggest some observance of religious practices. Did the Jews have a place to worship in Mesopotamia? Some think Ezra chapter 8 provides a clue. There, Ezra recruited personnel for the temple in Jerusalem from the Levites and others who lived in Casiphia. Some have gone so far as to assume that a full-fledged temple was located there. Others believe it may have been a Levitical school and nothing more. Whatever it was home to a group of Levites whose skills were needed in Jerusalem. After the loss of Egypt around 400 BC, Persia spent more than 25 years fending off the Greek threats to the west before being ready to try to retake it. When they did try to invade in about 373 BC, the Egyptians were able to successfully turn them back. Artaxerxes was now in trouble. His armies decimated and the treasury empty. He had a very hard time managing the western parts of the empire. The Greeks and the Egyptians continued to strengthen their power and influence. Throughout the 360s, Artaxerxes II constantly fought off difficulties in Asia Minor. Meanwhile, in Judea, the region was under constant pull from the waxing and waning of both Persia and Egypt. For most of the final days of the Persian Empire, Judea and Samaria remained under Persian influence, while entertaining hopes of gaining independence that was never realized. After the death of Jerusalem's high priest Yohanan, his son Jaddua assumed the role. With Yohanan, because Yohanan was so effective as Judah's governor, his death likely led the Persians to appoint a new secular leader to strengthen their local control. Around 370 BC, as Jaddua began his high priestly duties, a Judean named Hezekiah was named provincial governor. Coins inscribed with Hezekiah and governor in Hebrew, closely resembling those of Yohanan, indicate Hezekiah's swift assumption of governance. Hezekiah was to be the last Persian appointed governor in Judah. The Hebrew on Hezekiah's coins reflect Judah's increasing self-governance despite being under Persian rule. This period also saw the emergence of distinctly local symbols on Judean coins, like the lily, a prominent motif in the temple decorations as referenced in 1 Kings. About Jaddua, it's been said that he was a man of spotless integrity. Josephus is our sole source of a reported meeting between Alexander the Great and Jaddua. Alexander demanded Jaddua's allegiance or threatened destruction, to which Jaddua responded he would have agreed if not bound by a treaty with Darius. Consequently, Alexander prepared to attack Jerusalem. Josephus narrates that on the eve of the assault, Jaddua received a divine message in a dream, directing him to open Jerusalem's gates and honor Alexander. Jaddua complied, and Alexander, to everyone's surprise, showed deep respect to the God of Israel by bowing before the name. Of this incident, Ironsides writes, Jaddua is said to have put on his pontifical garments and with the scriptures of the prophets in his hand, to have gone forth to meet the conqueror, attended not by armed men, but by a body of white-robed priests. As they drew near the army of Alexander, the latter is said to have hastened to meet them, declaring that he had but recently beheld the venerable pontiff in a vision, and recognized him as the representative of the God of heaven, who would show him what would greatly be to his advantage. Jaddua opened the prophetic scroll and had one of the scribes in his company read the visions of Daniel and their interpretation. Alexander saw the undoubted reference to himself and declared that he would never permit Jerusalem to be touched, nor his temple polluted, and sent the high priest back laden with gifts. Alexander also recounted from a dream from 3 years earlier, where a figure resembling the high priest predicted his victory over the Persians. Recognizing Jaddua as the figure from his dream, Alexander believed that Israel's God would support his campaign against the Persians. At the temple, guided by Jaddua, Alexander made sacrifices to Yahweh. He fulfilled the Jews' request for a tribute exemption every 7th year and freedom for them and Babylonian Jews to observe their customs. Josephus notes these privileges motivated many Jews to serve as mercenaries for Alexander. In conclusion, Artaxerxes I's reign marked a period of peace and the flourishing of culture, while his successors faced the persistent ebb of Persian influence. The narrative of the Jews during this era, from Nehemiah to Jaddua, reflects a community accustomed to foreign rule, yet maintaining a distinct identity, balancing their religious traditions with the political demands of the time. The Jews' experiences in Elephantine and Babylon showcase their cultural integration and the complexities of diaspora life. Their efforts to preserve religious practices amid shifting powers highlight their commitment to faith and identity. The story of the ancient Jewish community at Elephantine in particular reveals their struggle for religious expression against local resistance. Jaddua's legendary encounter with Alexander the Great encapsulates the end of this era, blending the prophetic visions of Daniel with the unfolding historical event. Alexander's deference to the God of Israel and his subsequent actions toward the Jews suggest a recognition of their unique status and a strategic alliance that would impact the region's balance of power. The Persian period's closing years, marked by internal strife and external pressures, set the stage for the Hellenistic influence that would follow. Jewish history during this time, while not fully known, reveals a people poised at the crossroad of empires, navigating the challenges of autonomy and influence. As we reflect on this period, we see the enduring themes of faith, power, and identity that continue to resonate throughout history. The lessons learned from the Jewish experience under Persian rule remains relevant, reminding us of the persistent quest for self-determination and the intricate balance between cultural assimilation and the preservation of heritage through history. Here are some thought questions for discussion. Think about these questions, reflect on what we've talked about, And if you come up with an answer, leave that in the comments. I'm curious to see what you guys think about what we've been discussing. Okay? Question number 1. How did Artaxerxes I's reign impact the Jewish community both positively and negatively? Like, seriously, Artaxerxes, and there's an S and then you have to put an apostrophe S because, you know. Question 2. What do the transitions of power following Artaxerxes I reveal about the stability of the Persian Empire? Question 3. How did the role of the high priest evolve during this Persian period? Number 4. In what ways did the Jewish communities at Elephantine and Babylon maintain their identity? 5. What are the possible reasons Yohanan chose not to assist the Jews of Elephantine in rebuilding their temple? 6. How did cultural and religious assimilation manifest among the Judeans in Babylon? 7. Why do you think Alexander the Great showed respect to Judea and the Jewish God? And for 8, I want you to reflect on the role of divine intervention in the story of Judea and Alexander. And how does this theme resonate with you personally? Thank you so much for coming to tonight's class. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you have any questions of your own about what we've covered in tonight's class, please leave those in the comments or shoot me an email. If you've enjoyed this class, please give it a like, as we are trying to grow our classmates this year. And the more you like the video, the more YouTube will send it out to other people. Please consider subscribing to our channel if you haven't already. And also, if you wouldn't mind sharing the video in your social media groups, your Facebook groups, your Bible groups, that kind of thing, because we do want to grow the class this year. We hope to see you in another 2 weeks for our next class.